Please make sure your seat color is green. And at this point, I would like to turn our presentation over to Rick. Rick?
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Garibay, and I'm here with Todd Sussman. Hello. Thanks for the great introduction, Katie. Appreciate it. As Katie mentioned, I am a principal consultant and the Regional Connected Systems Practice Lead for Framework Technologies with Neudesic, which is a Microsoft-managed and Microsoft Gold partner. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to share best practices and lessons learned with you today from a large-scale SOA project that Todd and I were recently involved with in a leadership capacity. Todd Sussman, Connected Systems Practice Lead, Platform Technologies, in a program called PrePass. So a little bit about the PrePass program. PrePass is an automated vehicle identification system that enables commercial vehicles equipped with RFID transponders to be pre-screened throughout the nation at designated weigh stations, port of entry facilities, and tolling stations. And the way the PrePass product works is that once commercial vehicles that have a RFID transponder are identified, they're actually pre-screened just in time to make a determination as to whether or not that vehicle can bypass the inspection facility or have to be pulled in. So these vehicles, are traveling at highway speed and basically get an indicator within their cab. Green means keep going, and red is be pulled in. And so the determination as to whether or not the vehicle should actually be pulled in or bypassed is based on a number of different information or facts, including driver safety record, compliance with various local, municipal, and state regulations, making sure that all paperwork has been filed. And so it very much is an automated system for really reducing the fuel consumption time and really saving these commercial vehicle companies money. Obviously, it's also a great boon to the environment in that with the reduction of emissions and idle time, vehicles are burning much cleaner if they're not having to pull in and out. One of the main focuses of the Department of Transportation is really figuring out ways to reduce accidents or incidents on federal freeways caused by commercial vehicles. And that includes commercial vehicles that are hauling different types of commercial cargo, buses, et cetera, et cetera. And so PrePass really goes a long way in reducing those incidents as well, because it turns out that statistically speaking, a large majority of accidents that involve commercial vehicles are actually happening when the vehicle is slowing down or speeding back up and entering highway traffic. So this was a very interesting and unique opportunity for us to partner with the PrePass program. And really what PrePass came to Neudesic for was to really determine how they could make the experiences from a customer service perspective for existing customers more efficient and more effective, and certainly how they could increase revenue by attracting more customers to enroll in the process or the program. Now, it's pretty safe to say that PrePass, if you're a commercial vehicle operator, pretty much sells itself, right? Who doesn't want to avoid having to get pulled in to do a weight check or some kind of inspection check? So it really helps everybody out in terms of saving fuel time, money in the environment. And so really what we did is we partnered with PrePass to completely transform their self-service operations and really help them to deliver these self-service capabilities built on top of a world-class service-oriented architecture on the Microsoft platform. In fact, the entire solution is built exclusively on the Microsoft stack. So the PrePass program is a public-private partnership between the federal, state, and private industry. And a great deal of investment has been made to position PrePass as the leader in transportation e-clearance technology. So after a recent inventorying of current business processes and technologies, it became clear to PrePass leadership that the most effective way to increase revenue is to have resources working on revenue-generating activities. And that probably makes sense to everyone that's joining us today. And so in order to redeploy resources to revenue-generating activities, our sponsor really needed to move a lot of the operational dependencies and non-value manual efforts that had kind of accrued over time throughout the existence of the pre-pass program. So they really started by looking for opportunities in which to automate. And one very obvious opportunity, as I mentioned previously, was really looking at how they were doing customer care today and what opportunities existed for really automating and optimizing the process of fulfilling customer care requests. So in order to deliver these new self-service capabilities, PrePass needed a flexible and reliable platform that leveraged their current investments and improved information delivery while improving the business processes themselves. So PrePass needed to improve cross-functional collaboration across multiple vendors within varied geographic locations, each of which had their own legacy technologies, process, and culture. And in addition, there was the introduction of new applications, new services that were positioned to kind of realize this vision of a completely automated self-service web-based solution. So while the PrePass team came to us to build a self-service web property, which we did, it was very quick that we realized that we actually needed to build a service-oriented architecture that the self-service portal and functionality was put on top of in order to deliver these important capabilities. So anybody that's been involved in SOA initiatives knows that SOA really at the organizational scale level entails a significant amount of change. It changes the way that business processes interact with existing assets and applications. It changes the way that developers build new and enhance existing applications to meet the demand of enterprise connectivity. And through that process, an SOA initiative at organizational scale will really drive change at every level in that organization. And as a result, the people that are assembled, the processes that you apply, and the technology that you deploy are really all critical components to the success of your SOA initiative, and PrePass was no different. So the plan was logical and exciting for our customer. However, the journey was definitely challenging at times. PrePass had to contend with multiple and disparate data systems and lengthy integration cycles. They uncovered several isolated business processes, many of which reflected technology constraints that were misaligned with the needs of the business. And in addition to delivering self-service capabilities, our customer really needed an architecture that would allow them to balance that innovation with the expectations of the PrePass leadership team, not just in delivering self-service capabilities today, but in scaling with the growth objectives of the PrePass program in the future. So, with a clear understanding at that point, which was clear as mud, right, just getting engaged in the project, the thing that we found out pretty quickly is that we had 6 months to deliver and completely replace the existing PrePass.com property with a fully dynamic, interactive, and customer self-service capable website. And so today, www.prepass.com is an automated self-service website that's been in production now for over 14 months that provides customers with product information, allows new customers to sign up for online services, and allows existing customers to maintain their accounts online. So as you might imagine, as commercial vehicle companies enroll in the PrePass program, one of the first things that they need to do is provide a number of credentials, make sure that they're actually authorized to bypass in certain states. And so that involves the enrollment process, which entails a number of state, federal, and municipal documents. And also for existing customers that want to add or remove trucks from their fleet and provision them with devices, there's a heck of a lot of interaction that happens throughout the entire life cycle of the relationship. So prepass.com was really a way to streamline that to really give the customer the best user experience possible, and at the same time really help PrePass to focus on their revenue growth goals. And so at the end of the day, we truly believe that we built in not only delivering the self-service portal, an enterprise SOA that will maximize PrePass's ability to enhance and streamline their business operations for the next 5 years and then some. So how did we do this? Well, in order to deliver these customer self-service capabilities, our customer really had to apply their people, a sound process, and state-of-the-art technology to expose their assets as services and compose those services with their business process so they could be easily consumed in a variety of client scenarios. And so this is really where the idea of thinking big, starting small, and rinsing and repeating comes in. By taking that bite-sized SOA approach, we really worked with PrePass to determine what services or assets or applications had to be exposed, how those would be composed with one another to align with business processes that were either existing, new, or modified, and then what assets would consume those business processes via services to really drive that business value. So we started with a very clear, defined list of the objectives of the self-service portal, and then really started just iterating on the highest value items and rinsing and repeating that process throughout that 6 months, such that at any given point, the customer was actually in a position to release the property based on the fact that a lot of the functionality that was being iteratively delivered was actually deployment ready. So one of the things our customer understood was that successful projects consistently have one common ingredient that really transcends all other components, and that is really the people. And while PrePass was confident that the skills and abilities of their team, our customer felt that it was necessary to really engage subject matter experts around the connected systems, service-oriented architecture space to really ensure that there was a high degree of quality in the deliverable. And our customer was specifically looking for thought leaders in the area of SOA implementations with a proven track record of actually delivering large-scale enterprise connected systems solutions on the Microsoft platform. And so after an extensive RFP process and technical review of vendor qualifications, PrePass chose to engage Neudesic. Now, as many of you probably know, Neudesic is a Microsoft Gold certified partner, and we're also a managed partner. And we have a proven track record of providing reliable, effective solutions based specifically on the Microsoft technology platform. We believe that our technical and industry expertise empowers enterprises like PrePass to enhance their technological capacity and respond to business opportunities with a greater level of efficiency. So we're very proud that we actually earned the opportunity to truly partner with PrePass in this endeavor. And so, I use the word partnership, which will be a recurring theme throughout this webcast. And while that partnership was essential, another critical decision we made was really to shift our focus from product to platform. Or I should say that a critical decision that PrePass had made that we partnered with them on achieving is really making a shift from an enterprise that was strictly focused on the constraints or capabilities of existing products and really kind of setting that aside and determining what this platform might look like that would actually enable the realization of an enterprise-scale, service-oriented architecture through delivering specific and finite business value via the self-service web property. And so we very early on adopted the vision or the mantra of platform, not product, which specifically focuses on capabilities that the platform should possess, that is then composed of existing legacy services, applications, and the introduction of additional business processes and applications to realize that platform, not product vision. So a team made up of both PrePass business and system analysts pushed every area of their business to articulate and forecast the capabilities of the organization using that data to identify the organizational strategy and process models. PrePass used that information to exploit the scope and opportunities within the project and to really make sure that we identified or that they identified the critical path items from a business value perspective and also identified whatever low-hanging fruit was available or within reach, rather, to actually deliver on those goals. And the transformation of the business process into a technology development and implementation plan was really exciting for our customer. And as the customer self-service portal and SOA was kind of taking hold and being breathed life, it really represented the beginning of a new technology roadmap for pre-pass and emerging opportunities that was founded specifically on the ability to deliver self-service capabilities. And really what you see on the screen today is the fact that, from an end customer perspective, what we were building was the prepass.com web property that provides marketing collateral and the self-service automated capabilities. And that was really built on top of this enterprise architecture that involved the integration of disparate data systems, ERP systems for customer relationship management and financial services, custom homegrown line of business apps, third-party packaged apps, and really interacting with different vendors. But of course, as with any other SOA initiative, right, the customer really doesn't care about everything that's going on behind the scenes, but it certainly was a focal point for Neudesic in really deploying our practice areas around custom application development and certainly connected systems to realize this vision of a fully integrated dynamic customer self-service portal. So we talked a little bit about partnership, and I mentioned that that would be a recurring theme. Our customers set a firm date of delivery and communicated that commitment to their board of directors. And so that meant that commitment to meeting that objective was everything in this project. Commitment to the project, to the process, to the methodology, and the corresponding timelines. But above all else, the most important commitment was really to the team within the team. We realized that productive teamwork would move us towards this challenge, and through that change, build our confidence and ultimately result in success, both within the Neudesic and pre-pass team, which very quickly became a team of one. And one of the initial challenges that you'll find in any team assembly within a project is really to embrace each of the cultures from the multi-regional, multi-corporation pre-pass team that's distributed literally coast to coast, and then use that opportunity to really learn from each other. And we did just that. We learned a heck of a lot from each other, both within pre-pass and across vendor teams, and certainly from the pre-pass and Neudesic relationship. As true partners, pre-pass and Neudesic really had to trust each other's expertise from the onset. And so, we certainly pride ourselves as a professional services organization in having helped countless organizations be successful with connecting disparate systems. We had a pretty good idea of what it would take to successfully integrate the various applications and systems as we understood them. We knew that we'd have to use, in some cases, contemporary service integration approaches, and in others, more traditional application integration approaches. But at the same time, we knew that we needed to work very closely with the subject matter experts within each application and application domain to truly understand the details and the nuance of each system. And we just couldn't have been successful without the tremendously talented group of people that really understood pre-pass's system inside and out. So, in order to deliver on this idea of customer self-service capabilities on the web, we had to align the existing assets and existing new and modified business processes with kind of what the business processes were required to actually deliver self-service capabilities. And many times, this meant distributing business processes across applications and systems owned and operated by various vendors, each operating in autonomous sites, networks, and organizational domains. And I can't stress enough how critical it was to have the expertise of our customer team, the pre-pass subject matter experts that truly understood their business domain, right? Truly understood the commercial vehicle business domain and really how it worked within the pre-pass program. And those subject matter experts really assisted us and were key to determining the alignment with various integration options while conducting really careful impact analysis of what it meant for a given application or system to participate in these automated distributing business processes. One example that comes to mind around how key this partnership and really this interdependent relationship really was is, the customer management and inventory system, had to be ready to really deal with the scale that self-service capabilities would introduce after the launch of the web property. And so this meant everything from how quickly prepass.com's back office could deliver on new enrollments, It also meant how quickly they could provision and distribute devices, which is really the lifeblood of the pre-pass system. And we really had to take a look at how those existing back office applications and business processes might have to be modified, certainly if not only from an infrastructure capacity planning, but from an overall business process standpoint to really align with this upping of the ante, if you will, in terms of responsiveness. And so we constantly learned from each other. The Neudesic team knew very little, as I mentioned earlier, about the commercial vehicle business and corresponding problem domain. And so we shared pre-pass's expertise of the business with our experience in building contemporary service-oriented applications and bringing them cohesively together as an enterprise SOA that would then be the bedrock of the self-service web property that really was the task at hand. So it talks a little bit about commitment. Commitment is truly a core value that every consultant, every engineer at Neudesic takes very seriously. It's really part of our corporate fabric, if you will. And one of the things that's important to note if you're doing any kind of SOA initiative, and if you're doing a meaningful SOA initiative, there's a really good chance it's going to involve a number of line of business, potentially multiple vendors, different teams in different geographies, and that is that SOA is point blank, it's a political business, right? To be successful in any significant SOA endeavor, you really have to have an undying commitment from your business sponsor and the influence to be able to remove impediments when they arrive. And we were very fortunate in that we had steadfast support from our sponsor in making sure that when we did have blocks, which certainly did exist if you think about the challenges that we faced in dealing with different vendors, different cultures, different approaches to solving a problem, the organizational capital of our sponsor to actually influence decisions was key to keeping that train moving, again, with the understanding that we had under 6 months to actually deliver this. And needless to say, sometimes this meant demanding unparalleled degrees of communication, collaboration, and transparency. Other times it meant delivering working software and expecting that other vendors and other teams deliver working software on a daily basis that met the overall self-service team's definition of done. And we'll talk a little bit more about definition of done and how key that is as a principle to actually being able to release software that is potentially shippable each and every day. And certainly sometimes feelings were hurt. To be effective, there really was no time for antiseptic meetings or conference calls. We needed to come together as a team on a daily basis, if not more often, and at the end of each delivery cycle, have something to show for what we had delivered in the previous sprint or iteration. And this required candid, brass tacks dialogue about what our real risks and liabilities were and what the best path forward was for each individual that was contributing to the goals. And so sometimes, for team members that aren't used to this level of engagement, the interaction can be uncomfortable. So everybody kind of had to push through that, keeping our mission at the forefront and really asking ourselves the question every day when conversations would get a little bit heated or, feelings were sometimes getting hurt. And that was what I'm working on today, helping to push the goals of the project further. And that really kind of helped to keep folks really focused on making sure that we weren't taking things personally, but really just focusing on what the goal was in mind, and that was to deliver these self-service capabilities in under 6 months. At the end of the day, our sponsor wasn't asking for perfection, but the point is that she was asking for us to all check our collective egos at the door. Whether it meant, from a technology standpoint, a people perspective, understanding the business processes, we all really had to come together, and we had to be passionate in our pursuit for learning the ins and outs of the pre-pass business and continuously coming to terms with how little we knew compared to the customers that we were working with. And that was kind of an even exchange at many points. And it also meant that for some, the changes to the business process, operations, and project management within various silos, or merely getting used to agile software development, which I'll talk about a little bit further in some of the process discussion that we had within the project, were just too much change too fast, right? So you have to be prepared for an aggressive timeline with very high expectations. Sometimes You're going to see some attrition. Sometimes you're going to see some cultural change that's just too much to bear for some. And really, in order for this SOA initiative to succeed, and for other SOA initiatives to succeed in their aligning of business with IT, there's a heck of a lot of change that has to happen, and that can have a ripple effect not just through applications, business processes, but also through people and technology. Now, I don't want to shift focus completely from the people factor, which certainly had a tremendous impact on the success of the pre-pass project, but I do want to take a few moments to talk about how critical sound business processes and product development practices or methodologies were to our success. Grady Booch, best known for his contributions to the development of UML, or the Unified Modeling Language, once said that good people with a good process will outperform good people with no process every time. So, you know, despite the decisions that we've made early in the project to use Agile software development, to use Scrum, to define definition of done, to define specific roles and ceremonies within the project, that was not a panacea or a recipe for success. It was really an optimizer for being able to deploy the people both on the customer side and on the Neudesic side to work as efficiently as possible. And many times that really means identifying a feedback loop that is capable of raising issues so that the team can address them as quickly as possible. And we didn't have the luxury, right, of waiting a couple of weeks to find that the build wasn't working or that there was a bug in this service or in the consuming side of this service agent. So that feedback loop, absolutely critical, and so we needed a process that really helped to accomplish that. And when I'm talking about process, you know, I really want to speak to process in a couple of different contexts. One is in business process and really defining, you know, how business processes should be stitched together in order to realize operational and business goals, and also, again, from a project management methodology or development methodology. Our sponsor understood that in order to grow her customer care program for from phone, fax, and mail to complete online service transformation, the way that pre-pass as a whole did business would have to be revisited. So that meant that for every business process, from enrolling new customers to requesting new RFID transponders and managing all the state and federal paperwork that is typical for the millions of commercial vehicles that use pre-pass every day, that had to be reviewed, scrutinized, to ensure that operationally the many back offices that are the lifeblood of pre-pass could continue to scale with the newfound agility that delivering self-service capabilities on the web would enable them to deliver. So in some cases, this meant adding new business processes to augment existing operations to manage this new paradigm that was being built. And so, you know, one example of that is the process of provisioning devices, right? In moving from a paper, phone, fax-based customer service world, the provisioning of devices, you know, was not didn't need to be as effective or efficient as actually giving customers the ability to go on to www.prepass.com, log in with their credentials, and, you know, literally drag and drop a vehicle and say, hey, I need a device for this vehicle. So this is one example where we really had to look at what does the provisioning process look like for enrollments or change modifications that originate from prepass.com versus some of the traditional methods. We also looked at existing business processes that needed to be optimized. And this is really where pre-pass as business analysts and business architects really were very helpful in helping us to understand how existing business processes worked and making recommendations to us on how those business processes could be improved to take advantage of this new customer care model. One example that comes to mind, actually one of my favorite stories about the project, is how legal documents could be better managed under this new online customer self-service model. Depending on the route they travel, these commercial carriers and the commercial vehicle operators that drive these vehicles are required to file important legal documents with state and federal agencies to ensure that safety requirements, among other things, are met. So some examples might be whether they're authorized to carry hazardous cargo, whether they're even authorized to bypass in different states. each state kind of has different rules and regulations for the criteria that needs to be met in order for a vehicle to bypass. And even customers with the best safety records and all their paperwork in place, still do get pulled in from time to time just to make sure that there's a good system of checks and balances. But anyway, whereas previously, if there was a change to the carrier's route, meaning that they needed to go through a new state or they started hauling different types of cargo, these customers would need to fax or mail proof that they had the legal ability to do so into the customer care center. And so these business processes were really optimized to support the ability of these drivers to actually scan and upload these documents at their own convenience. So one of the things that we realized in kind of talking to customer advocates and kind of doing usability discussions is that a lot of these commercial vehicle operators are actually pretty high tech. A lot of them have in-truck broadband access, PCs, scanners, etc., and the ability for them to simply be able to scan an image of this certificate or of this credential and upload it over the web now position them to actually get to a point where they can get on the road as quickly as possible. And so needless to say, modifying this business process to actually support the automated upload of credentials has improved PrePass's ability significantly to respond to the needs of their customers. Another example I'll touch on briefly here is the enrollment process itself. Before self-service was a reality, customers had no option but again to mail or fax or call their applications in to PrePass customer care. And so because PrePass works cooperatively with state and federal agencies, the application process consists of several forms which cover important company, driver, truck, and route information. And this can often result in applications consisting of dozens and dozens of forms that must not only be filled out, but then faxed or mailed as well for proof of documentation. And so these forms had to be manually processed and entered into the customer management system, so that then the system would be aware of the fact that this actual carrier has a vehicle which has a PrePass device that is authorized to actually bypass. And this would involve often several people per application and require several days to fully process. So actually moving that process into a digital format, right, the customer themselves now are actually entering the application, validating their information. And what that basically did is by making the enrollment process a fully functional online process, that process now takes under 48 hours, which is an increase in efficiency of almost 500%. Typical PrePass enrollments using traditional methods, fax, mail, phone, would take anywhere from 7 to 10 business days. So again, today, a large majority of these enrollments are actually taking place in 48 hours. So that's pretty immediate feedback around ROI and the benefits really that the PrePass team has realized from this portal. We'll talk about more. We had to embrace change at every level of the project. SOA helps organizations achieve this organizational agility by reducing the impedance mismatch, if you will, between the business and IT, so that the organization itself is free to change and adapt. And so it turns out that there is an inexorable relationship, right, between systems that are built to be flexible and the way that they are built and delivered themselves. We see a lot of organizations, we work with a lot of customers who really struggle to manage scope and IT projects, both large, medium, and small. And so often, a big reason for that is that walls or barriers exist between the business and the engineering teams that really serve as what I call informational dams, right? So if you think about a dam, the main purpose of a dam is to prevent or hold up the natural course of action, right? Whether it's to generate energy or to prevent flooding, whatever the case may be, but it's really impeding the natural course of action. And so to remain competitive, we believe that every business must be dynamic, and IT must be able to respond to and support the dynamic nature of the business. And this really means no longer resisting, but instead fully embracing change. And so embracing change can be difficult, scary. It requires a different approach to product development for sure. That kind of eschews this idea that there's some kind of a separation between the business and the team. Instead, informational dams have to be brought down so that information flows freely between all team members in a very crisp, disciplined, and accountable manner. So on the pre-pass team, Neudesic partnered with pre-pass to use Scrum, in which we defined roles, we managed artifacts, and collaborated in a very defined and disciplined way to keep each other accountable to a process that allowed us to manage scope and customer expectations expertly. So, at Neudesic, we believe that this approach to software development is highly effective in many situations, and it's, very often, unless the customer has, a different approach, which will always be more than happy to participate in and consider. We truly have found that Agile software development and Scrum is a better way to deliver software, but it's also always refreshing to actually, take a step back, having delivered a project, and actually watch a organization itself be completely transformed by the implementation of Agile software development and Scrum. And really, pre-pass is no different in this regard, and that's certainly one of the accomplishments that, as a professional services organization, we are very, very proud of. So, how does a daily process look like in kind of working through the scope? Well, there was a significant amount of documentation that was required to get the job done. Right. One of the things with Agile software development is the preference of working software over documentation. But one of the most widely misunderstood tenets in the Agile Manifesto is truly what that means, right? And so we believe that what that means is really focusing on delivering software over documentation, but in no means does it mean that we eliminate documentation completely. And so as part of the daily rhythm of the project, we're constantly interacting, sketching out user stories, conditions of acceptance for those user stories, had design diagrams on whiteboards, on pieces of paper in Visio, capturing the critical design elements such as object models, static structure, sequence diagrams, layer diagrams, etc. But in order to proceed at the rate we needed to, we also needed lots of one-on-one and group communication to convey ideas and resolve these problems. And again, that's not to say that we didn't capture formal documentation. We absolutely did, but we weren't concerned on producing academically sound UML 2.1 diagrams or reams and reams of documentation. We were really focused on delivering working software. So we can't talk about a project from a process perspective without touching on architecture. And architecture means a lot of things to different people. I personally look at architecture as really choosing the right combination of best practices that complement one another in order to address both the non-functional and functional requirements of a group of software components that will then be packaged into any number of products. And so just as with functional requirements, non-functional requirements such as performance, security, scalability, reliability, et cetera, can also vary, right? They can vary as we learn more and more about the problem domain. And so depending on the architecture and underlying design, the impact of these changes can vary. So key to the success of the pre-pass project was really taking an emergent approach to architecture, and that meant really looking to our software engineering body of knowledge around design patterns and really choosing the right patterns to get at least the initial foothold in while leaving enough lubrication to revisit some of those decisions and refactor later. So I can't stress enough how important design patterns around integration and distributed software development were to our success in giving us that flexibility. It was critical that at the end of each sprint, we had potentially releasable software. That's a theme that you often are hearing within the Agile software community, and certainly you've heard me mention it more than a couple times. And the reason for that is that business could change at any point in time, right? A decision to go to market faster and result to reacting to a competitor or a need out in the market, and really being able to know that we don't have a lot of churn or a lot of work to do to actually get the software into a releasable state was one of the things that we certainly valued as a core tenet within the project. And so Scrum helped us to consistently work on those highest value stories or features, which gave our sponsor options on precisely, what could be released and when. And so just as with architectural and design patterns, other process and engineering techniques were essential to ensure that quality never suffered as a result of agility. Some of the techniques that we employed was test-driven development, making sure that for every line of code, or just about every line of code, we had a unit test to back that, and then we took it one step further and integrated it into a daily automated build, which provided push reporting out to the team and to management, so that no one ever had to ask kind of how things were going. We actually knew exactly where we were based on the number of unit tests written and their pass or failure rate. Quick note about the automated build process is every single day or evening, actually at midnight, we would have a full build process that was repeatable, which involved getting the source code, compiling it, compiling the CHM help documentation that really served as SDKs for the rest of the teams across vendors, running unit tests, packaging that build up, staging it, and then deploying it, such that every day we were able to integrate all of the applications, components, and integration points across the solution stack, smoke test that, and make sure that it was working so that we knew that at the rate of change we were actually still accomplishing our goals. So with that, I talked to you a lot about kind of the strategic vision behind PrePass, talked to you about how critical people and process are, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Todd Sussman, who's going to share with you some of the technology decisions that we made and why we made those to close us out today. Todd?
Thank you very much, Rick. So as you've already heard, Rick explained that PrePass came to us and asked us to partner with them and help build this safe self-service capabilities over the web. As we've had more conversations with the customer, it became pretty obvious that we weren't just building a web property. We were going to have to create this world-class service-oriented architecture. You see, service-oriented architecture projects tend to fail when they're either being driven from the top down or the bottom up. And you might ask, what exactly does that mean? So we look at it and we say top-down SOA is that 3 to 5 year roadmap where the business basically starts explaining to you, we're going to analyze our requirements, we're going to spend a year looking at everything, we're going to spend 2 to 3 years building our next services, etc. And what happens is by the time you start delivering working software, business requirements have changed and the project is considered a failure. The other approach is bottom-up, where basically the developer ends up being king. The developer gets to dictate what transports you're going to use to talk to them, what's their policy that they're going to be using, etc. We tend to take this middle-out approach, or taking a bite-sized approach to service-oriented architecture. And basically, this is a successful hybrid of the other two approaches. Basically, business gets to determine what the strategic vision is, and they set out a clear direction and set of priorities for what they want to see. Then, based on business drivers, the organization can take these iterative steps, or this act of rinsing and repeating, if you will, and therefore they can deliver new dynamic applications back to the business on a regular basis, and you have tangible results that the business can see. Microsoft has long advocated this real-world approach to leveraging service-oriented architecture. The approach is focused on this, rapid time to value, or going after that low-hanging fruit, and delivering these concrete results through iterative incremental steps, and therefore align IT and business very closely. And this is really important because it basically will bring you to the advanced stage in the ESOM model that allows IT to be a business enabler instead of a cost center. So instead of just being a drain on the budget, you are actually delivering value on a regular basis. Excuse me. So Rick spent some time talking about people and process, and I'm going to talk about the technology that we use to deliver on that vision. Basically, we had decided to choose the Microsoft .NET platform because it had a very rich messaging infrastructure that we could leverage through .NET and through the Windows Communications Foundation. So as you heard, the customer had this mantra of platform, not product, and we had to be able to support that. And one of the big critical decisions we made right up front was that we were going to build this SOA infrastructure on what's considered widely accepted messaging standards. That meant for some of our services, we were going to be using basic Profile 1 compliant services that anyone could consume, while at other times we were going to have to start looking at WS Star and more sophisticated messaging standards to support the business process. So exactly what does that mean? Well, we had some processes that involved complex call chains, and we were going to have to be able to guarantee atomicity or compensation in case of failures. So one example is when a new customer was being enrolled in the service. The business process had a number of services that needed to be executed, and they were responsible for persisting basic customer information, registering trucks, assigning corresponding devices, etc. These had to be coordinated across multiple resources, yet had to have this consistent and reliable feel. WCF out of the box offers system.transactions namespaces, and this allowed us to provide standards-based transactional capabilities and giving the developer a cohesive and productive design time experience. But when you look at it, we had a very nice standards-based messaging system, support for transactions, reliability, all of the things that you would expect out of a world-class messaging platform like .NET Services provides, but we also had to have architecture involved. Our architecture came in the form of Neuron ESB. Neuron ESB allowed us to implement a enterprise-caliber publish and subscribe capabilities, giving the developers the ability to do that with just a few lines of code, and it could support the contemporary services as well as traditional application and platform integration approaches that Rick mentioned earlier. What's important to remember, though, was that we had to do all of this quickly. It's not a multi-year development effort. We had less than 6 months to deliver all of the capabilities and a service-oriented architecture while still dealing with all the changes that you expect on any kind of major project that you might be working on. We had to deal with multiple communication protocols, messaging codings, standards, etc., etc. We also had to make sure that we could meet performance and reliability requirements as dictated by the customer. Once again, WCF gave us everything we needed to be able to expose, compose, and consume all the various applications we had to in order to deliver these online service capabilities. As we discussed briefly, we wanted to be able to compose and consume services in a manner that actually reflected the way the business truly operates. So we needed to provide this sophisticated messaging pattern, such as publish and subscribe, and doing it with minimal amounts of code and not reinventing the wheel. Again, very tight time constraints. So with Neuron ESB, wiring up parties was extremely easy. We could define who had permission to publish messages, who had permission to subscribe to messages. These were all controlled by topics or business events, if you will, and those, in turn, dictated the communication transportation that was required to ensure the reliability, durability, and other requirements that the customer would dictate. So by leveraging Neuron, we were able to deliver very domain-specific solutions that took advantage of the best that WCF, and later on you'll see the BizTalk BRE, had to offer, and still maintaining loose coupling and a very nice cohesive communications platform. One of the things we looked at was how we could optimize existing business processes and create new ones, while at the same time extracting the business rules from the logic layer and moving them to a higher non-evasive layer that could be leveraged by all members of the team and not just developers. To this end, we chose to use the Microsoft Business Rules Engine that ships with BizTalk Server 2006 R2. The nice thing about this product was that it broadened the reach of the business rules management and ownership to all levels of the organization. This gave extra accountability to managing the rules, and it had a really big, significant impact on the business itself. Confident that we had the right platform in place, we had to make sure that the language used between business and engineering was ubiquitous. This meant designing solutions according to language specific to the business domain. We designed WCF services based on themes that mirrored the business and business processes that these services were intended to support. This approach not only provided a separation of concerns between and behind the services, but it helped develop a consistent, recognizable language around the services that everyone within the team could use to have meaningful conversations. In addition, we also made sure that when the services were compiled, help files were generated on a nightly basis. This allowed every team member to see what might have changed from day to day and how to leverage the service the way it was intended to. If you think about business process, it's really just a conversation that spans a number of parties. So, for example, when we want to enroll a customer into pre-pass, there are a number of messages that get exchanged in the context of this enrollment. That can be thought of as a conversation amongst multiple parties and or systems. Neuron ESP has a topical messaging model, and it was very easy to design this domain-rich messaging infrastructure that could be understood and validated by the entire pre-pass team. So what you actually see in front of you is a diagram that shows you in a graphical manner who has permission to publish and subscribe to messages on what business topic. By leveraging the BizTalk rules engine, one of the things that we were able to do was describe business rules in the vocabulary that the business was familiar with. We could provide a rule editor that could run on any desktop, and that way business rules could be managed and versioned and deployed without having to recompile and redeploy code. This allowed business analysts to participate in the business rule lifecycle while having clearly defined boundaries for ensuring the collaboration between the analysts, the developers, and the administrators. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Rick for the final home stretch.
Hey, thanks a lot, Todd. Appreciate your explanation around the technology side. You know, one of the things with the Microsoft Business Rules Engine, as Todd explained, is it really did allow us to democratize the process of rules ownership. And that's not to give the impression that a business analyst can take the business rules editor and run with it, but again, in that interest of partnership and really kind of defining areas of responsibility and assigning rules to people in an ownership role, it really allowed us to kind of scale out the responsibilities. And so delivering online self-service capabilities, as you've learned today, required a solid strategy and the right tactical decisions regarding not only people and process, but technology as well to succeed. We had a lot of the same goals and encountered many of the same challenges that all large-scale SOA initiatives do. But by having a sound strategy and vision in place and focusing on a bite-sized, iterative approach to delivering business value with a combination of the right people, smart processes, and the right tools, we were able to meet and or exceed our goals. It's been over 14 months now that prepass.com has been live, and we believe that the key metric that really has defined our success in this engagement is not so much the number of transactions that are processed per minute or per day, not even the ROI that you see in some of these statistics here, 500% increase in efficiency, but really customer satisfaction, right? In partnering with our client, our sponsor, and really understanding what her strategic vision was, what her leadership team's expectation were of hers, and delivering that through the realization of these self-service customer service portal on prepass.com, we really met the mark in making sure that we addressed both the strategic and the tactical along the way. So remember, when you're going out and tackling your SOA initiatives, think big, right? Keep the strategy at heart, but start small. Figure out what the next priority might be in delivering that business value, and then iterate through that. And if you do that, instead of trying to boil the ocean in your SOA engagements, which typically tend to fail, what you can start to do is deliver incremental business value, build credibility within your organization, and then little by little you can start to truly realize the promise of SOA. So at this point, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I apologize that we've run a little bit over, and I'll turn it over to Katie Churm now to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick and Todd, for this great presentation today. We did have a few questions come through. The first question is, when you say 6 months, did that include all the analysis required as well?
I'm sorry, Katie, can you repeat the question?
No problem. When you say 6 months, did that include all the analysis required?
That's a great question. This is Rick, and I can take that one. Our customer had gone through a pretty significant RFP process, and so they've really done their homework around what they were looking for and a lot of the analysis that had gone into that. So we truly had the benefit of that, and I believe that they spent probably a good 3 to 4 months during that RFP process. So we truly had, we definitely had the advantage of kind of their due diligence walking into the project. That said, to be fair, what we've learned from traditional kind of approaches to software development projects, which this project was by no means traditional, is oftentimes, even given the deepest amount of due diligence, what you really truly end up having is a map, and kind of once you strap the backpack on and lace up your boots and kind of go apply that map to the terrain. There's some rivers, streams, hills, mountains that you might not have accounted for, and that was truly the case here. But yeah, I definitely think that we certainly benefited by their due diligence.
Great. Another question came in. How was the business involved in defining the business process and taking responsibility of the services? Also, was the service organized according to some enterprise architecture, and how was that developed?
So this is Todd. I'll answer this question. So we had a significant number of business analysts that were actually part of our Scrum teams and involved in daily conversations, sprint planning, meetings, etc. And they basically came to us and said, we have a series of user stories that tie back to a particular business process. And once they were prioritized and included in a sprint, the team members that were responsible for developing that particular piece of functionality had regular meetings with those business analysts to truly understand the business process that we were expected to deliver. And by defining what the conditions of acceptance were and how it aligned to our definition of done, the BAs were able to take ownership of that business process and see it from end to end until the end of the sprint, where the actual functionality was demonstrated. And then the second part of the question was, if you recall, we had a conversation where we looked at the large number of services and how we could organize them into logical containers of functionality, and that was the upfront work that was done for the enterprise architecture. And a lot of that was based on the fact that our customer was able to come to us and say, here is a long laundry list of functionality and features that we will need to develop. And so we were able to do some of the upfront work around the enterprise architecture.
Okay, great. Please let me know if that answers your question or if you need any additional information. Next question, how large was the development team during the 6 months?
Great question. If I recall correctly, and this is off the record, I would say that we had about 20 man-months of effort within each month, and that was a combination of customer and Neudesic resources. Okay.
Next, did you process a truckload of RFI data? Typically, how many items per truck? How big were your loads on the data side handled?
Got it. Okay, so I'm assuming that the question is, how much RFID, data or whatever was being exchanged back and forth. So we weren't actually monitoring the loads of the truck. There is a transponder that basically identified who the truck was, who owned the truck, what credentials they had, what was their safety record. We were concerned about the actual physical truck, not the load that the truck itself was carrying. And basically, all of the information that a weigh station might be concerned with was transmitted. So once the truck was identified, we were able to pull up their credential history, their safety history, etc., and make the determination whether or not the truck was allowed to bypass a particular weigh station or not.
Yeah, and just to add to that, keep in mind that the self-service portal, right, was a purely administrative context, if you will. So we basically sat on top of the existing automated vehicle identification system, which is really in the operational context, and that's basically pre-pass operations per se. So nothing that we did specifically involved RFID within this particular project. We're doing some other work that certainly does, but in this particular delivery, this was really the self-service portal, and in the discussion around RFID was really just kind of describing what the pre-pass program is and the services it renders. We didn't really touch any of the RFID specifics from an operational perspective in the scope of this project.
Okay. Now, if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to type them in at this time. In the meantime, I'm going to click through a few polling questions, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. First question, was this content helpful for your business? Please go ahead and click yes or no. Thank you for everyone who's interacting. Next question, please rate the presentation content. Excellent, good, poor. Give everyone just a few more seconds. And third question, would you like us to schedule a follow-up? Yes or no? One more second. Okay, great. Now, if there are no further questions, and it doesn't seem to be, we would like to thank Rick and Todd again for this presentation today. We believe it was very beneficial. We will be forwarding out the recorded version of this presentation when it becomes available in about a week's time. And I want to make sure that you are all aware that we have one more webcast in the Bite-Sized SOA series. This webcast will be held on Tuesday, June 16th. I will include the registration information in our follow-up emails. We also have a series of Bite-Sized SOA in-person events throughout selected cities across the country. Please email me if you have any interest in attending any of these events. My contact info is on the ending slide at katie.churm@neudesic.com. Again, thank you everyone so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webcast. You are now free to disconnect.